Hello, pilgrims, and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. Find out more at biola.edu. I'm Brian Perez, and it is Tuesday, the 9th of July, and we are here live until 4 p.m. Pacific time, so grab an open line and let us know what you want to talk about. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. Same number you see there on the bottom of your screen if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, 888-564-6173. And answering your questions today, we've got Tony Clark, the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Newport News in Virginia. How you doing, Tony?
Good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. And Bobby Conway from Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. He is back home, it looks like, no longer in Southern California. But it was great having you here the past couple of weeks, Bobby. How you doing?
Good. It was great being with you guys as well, and good to see you today.
Yep. And in the studio with me, let's guess who this is. Could you say a few words?
Well, now you know, Brian.
That was pretty good.
Yes, I'm doing my Pastor Chuck impersonation today.
Chuck.
Because you've lost your voice.
I've lost my voice, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. What happened?
I don't know. I got a little bit of a, sort of a throat thing, and then I had a couple of days where my throat was tickling and I was coughing. I think, what the heck is going on? I'm allergic to something. I was looking for what I was allergic for. And then I preached twice on Sunday and talked to 50 people, and then my voice was done.
Yeah. But you sounded fine on Sunday from what I
did,
understand.
yeah. But then Sunday night, had you come Sunday night, Pastor Chuck actually showed up, and he taught the Bible study for me.
Man.
I used all of my Chuckisms as well, just to make it authentic.
Right. How cool. All right, folks, let's talk. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. 888-564-6173. Men, there is still time for you to sign up, I think, for the men's retreat happening next weekend. You can find out more about it at cccm.com. I believe men.cccm.com might take you directly there. I couldn't get on it, but somebody did. So maybe it's working. I don't know. Maybe it's just a sign that I'm not supposed to sign up. I don't know. 888-564-6173, though, is the number to call to ask us your questions today here on the radio program. And we're going to start with a question that was sent in online. This is from Archie in Virginia, who has a question about how to know who to listen to as far as pastors and preachers. My wife listens to a couple of guys and some prophetic preachers, to name a few, and it really just doesn't sit right with me, but I don't want to discourage her by being rude. Please help us make wise choices of who to watch. Well, you're definitely safe watching Pastor's Perspective on Facebook and YouTube, but I'm a little biased about that. But yeah, we've talked about this before, that there's so much out there that people just turn on YouTube and watch whatever. The two people that Archie mentioned, I don't want to mention them by name, but at least one of them is well known. I don't know who the other guy is, but how do you discern who you should be watching and who maybe you should pass? Tony, we'll start with you.
Well, when I think of things like this, what comes to mind is what Paul told Timothy in 1 Timothy 6:5. He says, useless wranglings of men of corrupt mind, destitute of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. From such, withdraw yourself. And so if you have someone that is out there preaching a prosperity type of gospel, a gospel where money is at the forefront and godliness is a means of gain, Paul gives a very clear instruction: from such, withdraw yourself. And so that will be just what I would say on the subject.
Bobby Conway?
I would also try to say, maybe ask some questions. What is it that draws you to you about this particular teacher that you're listening to? When, let's just say a name that, everybody would know, and, like Joel Osteen, for example. and you were married to someone and listens to Joel Osteen, and you wanted to know why. Well, he just encourages me. I just feel lifted up. He's got a very positive attitude. I sense a lot of joy. Then I can see how you would say, that's understandable. I mean, he does try very hard to make sure that he presents a positive case, and he's being joyful. Is there any concern that you might have that you can miss something if you're driven to really focus on, saying things always, positively, and maybe not looking at the negative? Could there be a misleading that could happen? Yeah, but I'm totally aware of that. I just feel lifted up. And so you're not really looking at this like preaching of the Bible as much as just motivational speaking. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's one level. And in that conversation, I've already realized, well, there's discernment enough to know that this is not, Bible preaching. And it's just the fact that there's encouragement in one area. And just because somebody, for example, you could listen to somebody who preaches the truth, and have a hard time listening to the person, even though they're preaching the truth, and get more out of listening to somebody that's preaching the truth 90% of the time and missing it 10% of the time because you like the person and you like the way that they speak. So I would say there's a problem for the person that preaches truth and does so in a way that doesn't connect. There's a problem with the person that tries so hard to connect that loses sight of preaching the truth. If you talk to the person, then they say, oh, I didn't realize that there was any false teaching. Yeah, well, you could look into this a little bit more. This would be some of the concern. And I'm not saying, I'm not even on Joel Osteen at this point. I'm just using him from positivity. Now let's go over to Kenneth Copeland and say, okay, we're talking false teaching, just blatant false teaching. Then what if my spouse will say, well, I pay attention because people I work with are really influenced by this person. I just kind of want to know what this person's listening to so I can better, be a witness. Oh, okay. So you're not being influenced by the false teaching. No, I'm aware of it. So in other words, I would ask a lot of questions to find out the motive. And then I would say something like, hey, well, do you mind if I just share some of my concern here? If I felt like you were leaving yourself open to being influenced, I'd just say, the Bible does talk about, false teaching. Do we agree on that? Yeah. Okay. What would you say qualifies as a false teacher? All I'm trying to do is lead you in a conversation, if you're listening right now, that would protect you from just going home and saying, turn it off. And then you're in an argument, because that might not work as best, though you want to get the person to be tighter in thinking about what they watch and listen to. It might mean you have to ask a lot of questions, show that you're thinking about the person's heart, their reflections, understanding how they got there, he or she got there, and then go from there.
Now, Archie mentioned that these particular pastors that his wife is listening to are prophetic preachers. Now, I don't know if that means that they are always looking at end times prophecy, or if they're the kind of guys that, prophesy words of knowledge, or I don't know what it is exactly, but what would you say, Brian, when it comes to those two teaching styles?
Now, Brian...
I mean Chuck.
Oh, right.
Chuck, yes. Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, I think, I'm just guessing, I think the prophetic preacher is a reference not to people teaching end-time stuff, Bible prophecy. It's probably people teaching with a so-called, prophetic gifting where they're prophesying and that sort of a thing. And, there are people who do that. And I think both Tony and Bobby both gave excellent answers. So I don't feel like I need to say anything else, except I'm just wondering if it was Kenneth Copeland, I just was wondering about the dancing, if they've been drawn maybe in because of the dancing. That perhaps is what attracting them.
They want to work on their dance moves. They felt like, hey, honey, I thought maybe we could practice this together.
I mean, he is a guy. If you're going to dance, he's a guy you want to emulate.
He can bust a move. Oh, man. Yeah, that's so true, though, as far as like if it's that level of again, what Tony said is true, for sure. I think, we work together as a team on this and take short little sound bites. And I just think probably and I think we both agree with we think we'd all agree with one another. So just figure out a way, I guess, with truth and love to have a conversation. And, and here's the question. So your spouse says, I know this and I'm just going to keep listening to it. Well, then you're in a relationship where you have to figure out how are you going to navigate staying one while you're theologically not aligned. And that can happen at different seasons where you can be married and you can get influenced by different things as a couple and go in and out of different space like that, even in your marriage. And you got to keep that oneness intact.
And I think too, whether it's this prophetic preaching or prosperity stuff, it does have, it runs its course in some ways. And I think that in some cases you might have to just give some space and be patient and just pray that the Lord would make it clear to the person, because these prophetic preachers are not preaching prophetically, actually, and I think that there's a place where that will be revealed. And the prosperity message, it has its moment, its collision moment with reality, where you're like, you're doing all this stuff they're telling you, but you're still broke, and you figure out like, oh, maybe this isn't what I thought it was. So, yeah.
Tony?
Yeah, I think that, the husband is rightfully concerned. He feels led to do something. Because as I've always mentioned, Amos 3:3 says, how can two walk together except they agree? And so here it is that he feels, it's obvious that they've had some conversations and some differing of opinions on it. And so now he is calling or writing in saying, what should I do here? Because obviously it's creeping into the marriage relationship itself. And so, it's one of those things where he has to pray that God will soften his wife's heart, that he gets some good, sound biblical advice on how to navigate through these troubled waters. And God to give him the wisdom, because he's searching, and maybe she's quoting some of the rhetoric that they quote, and he doesn't know how to come back at it. And so, one of those things that's needed to be dealt with, because, he's the leader of the home, and he's feeling some kind of way that his wife is drawn away to such things as this. And I think that God will help him navigate through this based upon what was said here today.
Okay, Archie, thank you for sending in your question on Facebook Messenger. And we pray all goes well with you and your Edith. Well, that's not her name. I'm just making a reference to an old TV show. Never mind. Okay, let's go to the phones now at 888-564-6173. Maybe we'll get to more Facebook questions a little bit later. But first, here is Darnell calling from Fullerton, California. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Darnell.
Hey, may Christ bless all of you. I was listening to an old Billy Graham sermon on YouTube, and I love listening to him. And he said something that I didn't understand. He said if you break one of the commandments, you've broken all of them. And so I want to ask you the question. I never played in the NBA, but if I say a lie that I played in the NBA, which is a lie, how would I have committed murder, or how would I have committed adultery logically, or how would I have stolen something?
Okay. Bobby Conway, what do you say?
This is a reference most likely to James chapter 2, verse 10. If you've broken one of the laws, then you're guilty of breaking all of the law. It's not to say that if you lusted, you murdered, or if you lied, you stole. It's really just a point of saying something like, if you've broken one of the laws, you're guilty as if you broke them all, in the sense that it only takes one broken law to be a lawbreaker to separate you from God. Yeah. And so it's not saying that you're guilty of every single thing. It's just saying you're, in a sense, is bad off and in need of a redeemer on breaking one commandment is if you broke them all, because both separate you from God. It's not literally meant to teach you've done every single thing wrong. That's the point.
Tony Clark?
Yeah, bravo on that answer, because that's exactly it. How many laws do we have to break out in the world before we're considered a lawbreaker? Just one. You run through a red light and you got blue lights in your rearview mirror, and that's what it shows, that the Ten Commandments are a unit, and it only takes one for us to be guilty before a holy God. So what the great doctor said was outstanding.
But using that police analogy, if we're speeding and the red lights come on, the police are not going to cite us for all these offenses that we didn't commit, just the one, or maybe they'll find some other things too while they're at it. But it's not considered breaking the entire law. Like, they're not going to haul us into jail for murder or anything like that.
It just shows that we're a lawbreaker, that we have broken the civil law that's been established, and no doubt you're guilty of it all. James 2:10 that the great doctor quoted, it shows that we are guilty before a holy God. It's as if you broke them all in God's eyes, because they're all a unit. They're all representative of the holiness of God. So to break one, you will find yourself guilty before that holy God. It's like you broke them all, because God is a holy God and they represent His holiness. And it shows once again, like the great doctor said, that you are a lawbreaker.
Pastor Brian.
Yep. Again, great answers from the guys. It's funny enough, I read that passage this morning, just in my own reading this morning in James. And, the two things James refers to, one is murder and one is adultery. And he's talking, though, to people who are more or less saying, well, I didn't do this, so, it's not really that big of a deal. But like the point that's being made is the law is a unit, and the point is breaking the law, not what particular law you broke. So like has been said, we're if we break the law, we are lawbreakers, and we're going to be held accountable for a violation of the law, not simply this particular law. Mm-hmm. So obviously there's a bit of a difference in the way God is looking at things than the way human courts are looking at things. So that's just a fact. We don't have to say that, well, how could God do that? Because we don't do that in our jurisprudence system. Okay, well, maybe we don't, but God does, and He is the ultimate lawmaker. All law descends initially from Him and down to us. So I think we just we don't have to understand it in the terms that you originally put it in, Darnell.
Yeah, Bobby.
And I would say the way that you framed it, Brian Perez, there is an element where if we wanted to say something like, every driver has committed a traffic citation, I mean, that would be true. All drivers are guilty of breaking traffic citations. I mean, nobody stays within the perfect speed all the time. We're all guilty of that. But we don't always have to look for a direct example either in our justice system. When we see something, we can use the example when it serves to help us understand the scriptures. And if it doesn't, we don't have to use the example. But I would say here's something different about the example like you would put up, where God is going to hold everybody justly accountable and commensurate to the life that's been lived everybody's going to be justly held accountable by the Lord. And so we can have confidence. So it's not like everybody's going to be judged as if they broke every single law. That's just talking about how do we get squared up to be justified before God, right? Like, well, we get declared righteous on the actions of one, Jesus, in the same way that we get, declared guilty for the action of one sin that could separate us from God. So therefore, God is going to be the perfect judge, and he's going to mete out judgment perfectly in his distribution. And we can have confidence in that. So it would be wrong to think that verse then would say, oh, sheesh, I'm going to be treated for, murder and adultery and all these things if I haven't committed that. Well, there's different layers of that as what goes on in the heart and stuff. So God's going to get to the bottom of every individual perfectly, where our justice system doesn't do that perfectly. Our justice system gets it wrong. Our justice system convicts people of crimes that they didn't commit. They miss things. They leave people innocent that should have been committed as guilty. So that's where you can start seeing some of the differences too when you use the analogy.
So it's almost like being disqualified for something. Like if there was a particular, the Olympics are coming up, so there might be 95 things that could disqualify you, and somebody's doing really well, but they mess up on one of the 95, and so now they're disqualified from being in the Olympics. That kind of thing. Would you say? No? Yes. Am I crazy? I'm crazy. Tony Clark, what do you think?
I understand.
No, you're not crazy. I was just thinking through that analogy. But every analogy is going to fall short when we trying to describe God. The whole trying to describe the Trinity as a solid, liquid, and a gas, or like the egg, the eggshell, the white and the yolk. It all falls apart. So it has some good points, but it falls apart. I'm just thinking about this whole thing. You're guilty of one. It's like you're guilty of all, because the point of the Ten Commandments is to show us our sin and show us a need for a savior. So you break one of them, everybody, we've broken them all. Because how many have not lusted before? How many have not had anger in their hearts, which is at the root of murder? Lust is at the root of adultery. Well, I got you there on the Sabbath. Well, how many of us haven't taken one day a week that we worship God in spirit and in truth at all times? How many of us has told a lie? White lie, half-truths, exaggerations. So, or coveted, the 10 commandments, to be materialistic or greedy for gain, or to want something that belongs to someone else. How many of us have not broken it? So if you've broken one, yes, you've broken them all. And I can guarantee you, just by going through the commandments, we have broken them all. So I can see the point, and we get that from Jesus, because he's looking at the heart. So I just, I think that there's room there for, if we broke one, we're guilty of them all.
Darnell, thank you for your phone call today here on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call to ask your question. We're here till 4 p.m. Pacific time on this Tuesday, the 9th. Give us a call, 888-564-6173. Let's go out to Rialto, where Emmett is calling in. And Emmett says here, listens to us on the podcast. So maybe he's not listening to us right now on the radio or watching on Facebook or YouTube, but he will hear this episode later on, and he will hear himself on it. Hi there, Emmett. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, pastors. Thank you for taking my call. I want to start by saying, like many people, I'm in a spiritual battle. And I heard Bobby Conway mention Pastor Brian's book on spiritual warfare. So I bought that, and I got a sister with it. It's The Powers of Darkness and the People of God. I've read through the spiritual battle one time. Now I'm going through the second time. And it's funny because I hear Pastor Brian's voice in my head as I'm reading the book, like he's narrating, because I listen to Pastor's Perspective so often, I can literally hear his voice as I'm reading through the book. I just want to say that real fast.
Well, I hope that's an enjoyable experience for you.
It has been. It really has been.
Good.
And it's a great book, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
So it's been a few weeks, but there was a week or a month where I swear that I forgot his name. I'm so nervous. John MacArthur's name came up several times in several shows over the month, and that's my go-to study Bible right now, the John MacArthur Study Bible. I have an ESV Study Bible also, but I feel like the MacArthur Study Bible, he expands. He has a larger definition, if you will, or a larger commentary section on particular verses. But what is you guys' perspective on the John MacArthur commentary? And then also, if you can recommend me an NET Study Bible. You guys have mentioned that a lot. So is there different commentaries as well in the NET Study Bible?
Yeah, the NET is the most thoroughly annotated Bible available. There's 66,000 footnotes in the NET. Wow. You can.
And Cheryl has read them all, right? Cheryl has read all the footnotes.
She hasn't got to the NET yet.
Oh, okay.
I got to tell her that. As a matter of fact, the NET started off on the internet, and they just like maybe 2 years ago, I think it's Thomas Nelson, actually started printing the Bible. So they're pretty thick, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I have a copy.
Yeah. I have one too.
Yeah, I go to the NET quite frequently. It's not a commentary as much as it's mostly an exploration of the languages. So it's produced by the Dallas Theological Seminary faculty. Bobby knows those folks over there, and it's good. It's very helpful. I like it a lot. I use it almost daily because I'm making comparisons with translations. But it's not like a study Bible in the sense of what you're talking about, like the ESV Study Bible or the John MacArthur Study Bible. Now, John MacArthur and the ESV Study Bible are probably theologically going to be quite similar because they both come from a Reformed or a Calvinistic perspective. With the John MacArthur Study Bible, you're probably just going to get more detailed and lengthy descriptions of passages. And I think Bobby and Tony probably agree with me on this. I think the only negative about the MacArthur Bible is just that he would insist in several ways on a Calvinistic perspective on certain passages. But this is not a big deal if you're aware of it and you see it and you recognize it. I've been reading Calvinistic commentaries for 40 years and appreciate them immensely and just happen to disagree with them on the finer points of Calvinism. So anyway, a lot of people use the MacArthur Study Bible and enjoy it and benefit from it. I don't personally use it. I don't know if you guys have ever used it. But I wouldn't see it as a problem at all.
Tony? Yeah,
I've used it and used his commentaries, throughout the New Testament before. And so, you just got to know how to chew the meat and spit out the bones, and you just got to know how to recognize that, and because it's a slippery slope. Because when like most of the commentaries are written by Calvinists or Reformed people. So if you go to the commentaries to try to understand or get a clear understanding of the scripture, it's a slippery slope that you can slip down in, and then next thing you know, you look up and you're Calvinist or Reformed as well. So, but like I haven't had any problems because I know how to chew the meat and spit out the bones.
Emmett, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. We've got to take a break, and then we'll be back with more of your questions. What do you want to ask Brian Broderson, Bobby Conway, and Tony Clark? Now is your chance. 888-564-6173 is the number to call until we close the lines at 4 p.m. 888-564-6173. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, there's the number right there on the bottom of your screen. Call it. 888-564-6173. We're back on Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America. I'm Brian Perez, and the phone lines are open. 888-564-6173 is our number. And we've got Bobby Conway, Tony Clark, and Brian Broderson here to answer your questions. 888-564-6173. Now, right before the break, we were talking about the Net Bible, New English Translation. You can find out more about it at netbible.com. And you can see samples of it and everything there, netbible.com. But we were also talking about the MacArthur Study Bible, and Pastor Brian wanted to bring up another thought.
Yeah, I just was thinking after the comments that there is one other area that I think people should be aware of, and that is John MacArthur's position on the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So he is in the category of what you call a cessationist, meaning that he does not believe that the sign gifts, prophecy and words of wisdom and knowledge, and to some extent healing and so forth, he doesn't believe that those gifts exist today. He believes that they ended with the completion of the biblical text and at the end of the apostolic period. And there's lots of people who hold to that position, but John MacArthur holds to a very aggressive opposition to the gifts today, to the extent that he even wrote in one book years ago on the charismatics that people who were speaking in tongues were actually being influenced by the devil. And so that is an extreme position. And I think when you're reading his commentary, especially on something like 1 Corinthians chapters 12 and 14, you're going to find there that he, I personally think that he just completely missed what the text is actually saying and has reinterpreted it in a way that is not really the correct way to interpret it.
Bobby Conway?
I think John would, understand for sure that, when a question comes up about his commentary, we have to have the freedom to interact with it even on, a live broadcast like this. This isn't, trying to be critical of John in that sense, because he's wrote a commentary and he's commenting on the Bible and we're commenting as well. And that means that what we're saying, people put their discerners on and they need to be able to think as well. I would say I have a MacArthur Study Bible. I've appreciated it a lot through the years. I think he, for me, more enjoyable to read his stuff than to listen because, he can come off harsh in his presentation style sometimes. And that is something that, people chat about sometimes, and I don't like that for the kingdom in that sense where like John goes after things really hard sometimes and he is hard to back off. He sees things his way and I get it. But I sometimes feel like whatever the most conservative position is, he's just going to be right there and take it. And so and I don't think that it always looks that way in the Bible. It's like it can sometimes just feel like if you're just most conservative position, like everywhere. Maybe sometimes we're looking through a lens of trying to like hold on to something in a certain way that we can't always be as tight about. So I think sometimes he is very just black and white about things that I don't think are as black and white as he presents his positions. But I appreciate the volume of work he's done. I think for a pastor, he is a very gifted Bible teacher. He's a very gifted pastor. He's to be commended for pastoring a church long term like he has. He has done a lot of good for the greater body. He's got a very good gift of writing. So I would say I thoroughly can enjoy reading his stuff. It's almost like if there was just one thing I could almost wish to say is, just soften your presentation style sometimes, because it can just alienate so many people unnecessarily so. And it's almost just a simple communication tool. So what ends up happening for me is when I was younger and I was a Calvinist, I was quoting Sproul, MacArthur all the time, but I find myself wanting to distance myself because of just the tone. And so like if I'm teaching, I'm not bringing out the commentaries as much anymore because of the tone. And that can happen sometimes with different communicators. And I feel like that's not a good place to be. So I'd say that's just a personal opinion, and I think that you can pay attention to that. But there's the observations theologically are two that Brian made: cessationism, the Reform. It just wade through that. He's going to be great for getting the position on cessationism. He's going to be great on getting the position of Calvinism. He understands that through and through. And then the Net Bible. I was at Dallas when that came out, and that is just an amazing resource as well. And I would recommend it.
Going back to your comments on John MacArthur's teaching style, how it can be sometimes harsh, some people would interpret that as, well, he's just being bold. He's just proclaiming the truth.
That's what they always say.
Right. Yeah. So where do we draw the line? What does it really mean to be bold? Does it mean that you have to be harsh? What would you guys say about that?
Yeah. Well, Paul the Apostle said to the Christians in Ephesus, he said, and he's speaking to leaders, he said, speak the truth in love. Speaking the truth in love. So you can speak the truth and you don't have to be harsh. It is a tone, and it's born out of, I think, a disposition that, quite frankly, I think it's rooted in some pride. When you think you're right about everything, you're just going to be very, very insistent, and you don't want to give any room for doubt or disagreement with your position. And I find that has seems to me to be the, and this isn't a recent thing or a one-off thing. This is a whole life of preaching. I've listened to John for 40 years, and his tone has never changed. It's actually gotten probably more harsh.
Wow.
The further he's gone, which is interesting because I look at my own life of preaching, and I look back when I was younger, I was much harder and more harsh.
Yeah, me too.
And I feel like part of maturing was to grow out of that. And so when you see somebody drilling down deeper into it, the longer you go, I wonder, what's happened here. So I don't know.
Tony Clark?
Yeah, I think that, definitely some of it could be and probably is rooted in a level of pride. But I think one thing is that all of us have different temperaments. There's just different ways by which we're wired. And, and on top of that, just like Jude verse 23 says, on some have compassion, making a distinction, save others with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garments defiled by the flesh. And so on some you have compassion, others you got to save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garments defiled by the flesh. And so there are preachers and there are folks with just a more wound up temperament, and publicly, I may lean more in that direction. For those who are used to just a preaching of God loves you, I will appear to be harsh to them. And then those who are used to getting the word direct, those people who are like things more direct, they will sing my praises or John MacArthur's praises. So it's how people are wired up as well. But could there be a level of pride? Yeah. I think so. Knowledge, 1 Corinthians 8:1, knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And so I think that there's some pride that can be in all of those who may have a more wound up temperament that preaches with more directness. And I will agree with that, just looking at just the history of my 40 years of being a Christian and being and the majority of that being in ministry.
Yeah, and I want to say that because I'm the one who brought up the pride thing, and that is not exclusively a John MacArthur problem.
Yeah.
Lots of people have that issue, including myself. So I'm not exempting myself from it or standing on some sort of a pedestal looking down. This is just an observation over the years. And Tony, I would disagree with you on your comparison between yourself and MacArthur. You are very straightforward and all of that, but there's a different edge there, and there is and I feel so often with listening to the preaching of MacArthur, there's a lack of something that is called compassion or sympathy or empathy, and that is not the case with you. You're not like that. So, your straightforwardness, your firmness, all of that. And then, of course, you've always got a good thread of humor woven into all of it, which, lightens it sometimes too. But you come across compassionately. And I think that's the most important thing. We all have to say hard things at times, but how do we say them? And do we say them in ways that we give the impression that we are better than other people, or we got it more together, or that God is angry with them? I'm not to get up and, give people the impression God is angry with them. We know Moses did that one time, and it cost him the promised land. So,
Sure did.
We need to be, I don't know if God, I might be angry at people. These people aren't coming to church. They're not giving. They're not doing all the stuff I think they should do. And then I get up and give the impression that God's mad at them. Well, I could be really, really wrong on that one. So I don't want to go there. But a lot of times, but a lot of times that is the impression I've gotten listening to. And actually, I gave this illustration Sunday night when I was preaching, because after 9/11, I was driving into New York City to go, minister in the city 2 days after 9/11. And I was listening to a John MacArthur broadcast into the city that he had specifically made for the 9/11 crisis. And it was an utterly condemning, ungracious, this is a judgment on your city because you're all evil and you should repent. This is a warning. And I just thought, wow, I don't know if that was really the right message to send into a people that were so devastated at the time. So that's an actual example of the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah. Bobby?
Yeah, and this is part in this critique. Again, it's a public critique. There's statements that are said publicly, like Pastor Brian's mentioning, and it's caused a lot of consternation and angst within the kingdom. I mean, journalists and stuff start writing about this in publications, like, wow, like this came off so this way, and it's just, for all of the wonderful things that he's contributed, it for me, on one level, I'm going, he's had more success in one night than I'll experience in a lifetime. So who am I to even offer anything to him? I'm a lot younger, but I would just say, I think that the observation more broadly would be he would have a greater reach. And so my heart in saying this is I would want to see him have the biggest reach possible. And I think he limits himself to his own choir, and he preaches well within that, but it creates replicas of that tone that I don't think serves the broader kingdom as well. And it's my observation that is a hard personality type. When you are really dogmatic and black, it's a very hard personality type to help back off of that. And it would be an amazing thing for him to be able to just say, you know what, my message, it's titled Grace to You. And, I realize I sometimes don't come off this way, and it's an area for me to work on. And I have hurt people with my harsh tones, and I need to look for maybe the best way to say things. I think he could be helped in that way. I think the kingdom would be better for that. But I do think that there's something as it relates to all of us. Like I appreciated him during COVID. I mean, he takes a stand. So the very thing that can frustrate you about a person is there's a time that he's going to lead people very confidently through a time, and they're going to feel really secure. For me, my weakness is like my flock might be like, so Bobby, like, well, we're in the tribulation. What's going on here? And I'm like, well, it could be that we're here, or it could be that we're there. And it might be that we need to look at this, or it might be that we need to look at this. Cause like I can get philosophically in my own head. And so that can create some second guessing that comes from my own second guessing in my own life. So I think that if that pushback came to me, I would say that's exactly right. And I want to learn to have the fangs when I need to have the fangs, because I don't think when people think, boy, if war broke out, let's show up at Bobby's door. He seems like the real survivor type, right? Where John would be like, let's go to war, right? Like he's going to give you that kind of confidence. I think people are like, I'm not sure that we're going to make it out of here without getting shot up. Bobby's going to be like Scooby-Doo, like jumping in our arms and stuff, like Pastor Panic. So I recognize my own limitations here is what I'm trying to say. And you can keep piling them on me as you listen, because it's pretty obvious that I don't have it all together either. So,
Tony, did you have any thoughts?
No, not after that.
Brian?
I guess the last thing. I mean, this is the last thing that I would have imagined would have happened today, that we would have this lengthy conversation about John MacArthur. And again, I want to say that I am not in any way denying, his contribution to the kingdom and all the ways that he's faithfully served the Lord for all of these years, and for that I'm thankful. But we can openly talk about these things. John does this quite regularly. I mean, this is part of what he's known for. He has no fear about getting up and telling people what he thinks about other people. So, I mean, maybe just the shoes on the other foot today. And so, but there's nothing malicious in anything that any of us are saying. Like all of us have said, I have John MacArthur commentaries in my library, and I have used them. And so for that gifting in that area, I am thankful.
Tony Clark?
Yeah, I have gotten things from pastors, throughout the years. And one thing I will say, I've learned the Greek language from John MacArthur. It was through his work and through his commentaries and his messages that I learned the Greek language and the tenses of verbs and that sort of thing. I learned all that from him and reading his material. So so I owe a great debt to my understanding of several scriptures and books of the Bible from his diligent study over the years.
Good conversation today.
Yeah, that's so good.
Oh, go ahead, Bobby. I'm sorry.
Well, I think we could all just step back and, it's funny. It's like, poor John, like we're having a conversation, and if, I mean, he's got bigger and better things to do than to be concerned about what's going on pastor's perspective. But, hopefully if this ever got back to him, he would just take it in the spirit of, okay, look, these guys they grapple with what my content confronts culture with and how people react to it. And they're in a position where they have to interpret things. But I mean, again, I think that at the end of the day, if you stick any of us on a panel of three and say, so we're going to talk about, Tony Clark for the next, 20 minutes, or Bobby or Brian. And if we've been as publicly published as John, there's a lot of material. I think that the last thing I would say is I really do hope that if people are listening, that they feel like there's a proper balance, that the good far outweighs the bad, that the amount of writing and theology and contribution and longstanding ministry and conviction is wonderful. I think you're really just dealing with a delivery issue here that we are only saying for such a time as this, we really need to be unifying, and it doesn't serve the church well when we black eye each other. And so someone say, oh, well, that's what you're doing right now. And I go, no, I'm trying to say, I think this could help the kingdom be better if we did it like this. And if somebody wanted to say, well, Bobby, if you did it like this, I would want to say, I want to know what I can do. Feel free to write in and tell me what I need to do differently. And if others would bear witness to that, then I want to be open to correction, because I don't think I have it all figured out at this stage. In fact, the thing that scares me most about being 51 is that I could maybe live another 30, 40 years. And it really makes me nervous to think about how much more potential I have to mess this life up in the next 30, 40 years if I get that long to live, knowing my fallen nature. So, Lord help us.
John MacArthur, if you're listening, you can call us. We've got a few minutes left. We'll keep a line open for you. 888-564-6173. Here's a question that was sent in online. It's from.
We'll let Brian do that interaction.
Yeah, for sure. We'll just drop the line.
This one, boss.
Yeah. Although with Brian sounding like Chuck right now, that would be really interesting to hear. It'd be like Chuck and John speaking to each other. All right, CJ sent in a question from Arizona. It wants to know, was the Mosaic law an actual law that was put into place? For example, did ancient Israel actually stone their children if they disobeyed, or stone people caught in homosexual activities? And did God create civic and ceremonial law, or just the moral law? What do you say, Brian?
God created the moral law, the civic law, and the ceremonial law. And yes, in certain cases, those things undoubtedly would have occurred. We don't have any record of that happening in Scripture. We do have the record of one man being stoned for a violation of the Sabbath during the wandering in the wilderness of the Israelites. He defied God's command, just, basically shook his fist at God and said, I'm going to do what I want to do, so don't tell me what to do. And so he paid the penalty for that. But, this is the legislation. Every country has its own legislation, all kinds of laws that lots of people probably disagree with, especially the lawbreakers. But we should not be surprised that God has his laws as well that he gave to Israel and they implemented.
Tony Clark.
Yeah, we have the Ten Commandments given to us in, Exodus chapter 20. And then in Exodus chapters 21, 22, and 23, we have those other laws, the ceremonial laws and all these other laws that were given to Moses to give to the people as they were supposed to live under a theocracy, a government ruled by God. So these are the laws that you are to have as a government, ruled over by God. So the moral law in chapter 20, chapters 21 through 23, those ceremonial laws and all those other things to govern the nation were given in those chapters.
CJ, thank you for sending in your question using Facebook Messenger. And we have run out of time. So if John MacArthur was going to call in, sorry, maybe you can call back tomorrow because we're out of time. We're going to have to close the phone lines now, but we will be back tomorrow between 3 and 4 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. Remember that we archive all of our episodes on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. In case you missed any of this today, you want to hear it again, share it with a friend, you can do that a little bit later on. And if you have a question, you can send it to us on Facebook Messenger or by filling out the form on the Pastor's Perspective page of our flagship radio station's website, kwave.com. Or just call us tomorrow. We love conversing with you guys. Love to hear the sound of your voice. We open up the lines about 7 minutes before 3 p.m. Pacific time. And that number, write it down, 888-564-6173. For Brian Broderson, Bobby Conway, and Tony Clark, I'm Brian Perez. And Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Biola University, ranked as the most comprehensively Christian university in North America.